Hello, surf nerds. Or maybe you're not a nerd, but I am definitely a surf nerd. My name is Jen, and welcome. This is another part to the longboard or big board series that I am working on. And this video is going to be a bit of a long one. There's a lot in here, so I'm just going to get into it. Today, I wanted to talk a little bit about some of the best ways and techniques of getting through the waves on a big board. And so I'm going to talk about a few different techniques and what are some of the ways that you might use them, what are some of the advantages. And the biggest thing is, I think a lot of times people get really intimidated with a big board because it is, well, they're big, right? They're a lot. So sometimes it can feel like it's actually harder to manage. But in reality, when we actually master some of these techniques, we can actually use the size of the board really to our advantage to help us actually get through the waves. And so one of the biggest, so for the four techniques I want to talk about are: one, paddling around the wave. I know this sounds really obvious, but it is really important specifically for bigger boards and longboards. Two is the punch through. And three is what I like to call the boof, or climbing over the foam. And four is the turtle roll. So I'm talking about each of these different things, kind of the pros and cons, starting with the first one. So the first one being paddle around. And it's obvious, but one of the biggest advantages of having a longboard is that you can paddle pretty fast. So what the paddle around means is that really when you're thinking about getting in the water, when you're thinking about paddling out, when you're thinking about paddling back out to the lineup, on a bigger board, and in any board really, you have to really think about your positioning, and you have to think about strategically what you're going to do. So for example, it might make sense, and a lot of the times it makes sense on a longboard, to just book it and paddle around the wave so it doesn't even break over you. A lot of the times, particularly when we're beginners, we can kind of get into this freeze spot where we kind of like sit there with the deer in the headlights sort of thing going on. And so therefore, one of the things that we're often taught at the very beginning is how to do a turtle roll. And the turtle roll is a great technique, but it's also a passive technique. And one of the things that as you start to advance and really start to kind of appreciate surfing is actually being more active and reactive and responsive to the whole picture around you. This makes you be more efficient with your energy, and it also makes surfing just way more enjoyable because it means less getting pounded and more having fun, which is kind of what we want, right? So the paddle around also means that you have to know when to use these techniques. So you have to know how to be able to read the waves. So where it's going to break is going to be the strongest point. So thinking about where you are in relationship to that strongest point. Are you right where the wave is breaking? Are you most at the strongest point? That might mean a different technique than, say, if you're in a spot where it's already broken and you're dealing with a big wall of white water that's been kind of coming towards you for a little bit. So I just wanted to mention that because the paddle around is actually one of my favorite techniques for being on a longboard. It's one of the advantages. I can usually paddle around a wave pretty quickly, and it's a great way to get around other surfers that are on the wave to make sure they have priority, et cetera, et cetera. So that's paddle around. Second thing is punching through. And now this is kind of my second favorite go-to. This technique's really, really great for when the whitewater is not too strong. And it also can be helpful for when the wave is breaking or not quite gonna break. You can get the last few little strokes, push the nose of the board through the lift and kind of glide down the backside. And so what the punch through really is it's a push-up, and so you would put your hands right by your chest as if you were to stand up, but rather than standing up, you kind of push your chest up, and the idea is actually you let the white water pass between you and the board. A little trick for this one too, for the punch through, is really pushing the nose underneath the whitewater, you might even have to kind of do a bit of a scooping motion and then letting the water pass through. In the video, you're gonna see a couple more advanced versions of this, but basically, as you're a beginner, you can just basically do a push-up. This is really great for, again, whitewater waves and whitewater that's not too strong. The third one is like the climb over, and that one is definitely more of an advanced technique. You're gonna see an example of that further along. That one's really great for big walls of whitewater, but again, I recommend kind of focusing on the paddle round and the punch through and the turtle roll first, and then looking at the climb over as another option in your arsenal. So the turtle roll. I'm actually wanting to do a full video on the turtle roll, but what I just wanted to touch on right now is, because it's a passive technique, you want to use it kind of last. You want to be able to go like a punch through and a paddle around. It allows you to stay in optimal paddling position so you can keep moving forward, which actually means that you can progress a lot further through the surf and through the break to actually get where you want to go. So it's super helpful. Where you might want to use the turtle roll is as, again, it's a defensive. So if the wave's going to hit you right on the head, do a turtle roll. If you have another surfer maybe that's coming right to your head, again, do a turtle roll. So turtle roll is really great if you're going to get a big wall of whitewater, something that's too big to deal with through a regular punch through, you'll want to opt for a turtle roll. So anyway, the rest of the video, I'm going to talk through a couple different examples of these different techniques being used in a professional surf competition. So enjoy, let me know if you have questions, and do let me know if you want me to go deeper into any of these pieces in the future. Okay, so the very first example that I'm going to walk you through is the punch through. And now the example that's coming up is a more advanced version of the punch through, because you're going to see the legs disconnect from the surfboard. This is not important if you are learning. All you really need to do is a push-up motion so that you can allow the nose of the board to go underneath the whitewater and your chest to come up above the white water, and the water will pass through your body and your board. So what you're going to see on the left and center is a woman approaching the wave. She's going to do a push-up motion, letting the white water pass through her body. So this is the slow-mo version. You notice she's paddling with some speed. She's heading straight for the whitewater. She's not coming in at an angle. She is at a 90-degree angle at the whitewater. She pushes the nose through with some force, and some forward momentum lets the whitewater pass between the board and her body and comes back down. Here's another even slowed down version. So again, if you're a beginner, you don't need to get your legs over. You can just practice this at first with just pushing up with your body and keeping both feet on the bottom of the board, and eventually work up with your balance over time to this more advanced version. So next up, I would say, is probably the most advanced out of all four techniques. It is really helpful though once you get it going. If you're new, I'd recommend focusing on your punch through, paddle around, turtle roll, and reading the waves. So one of the things that's really important here is really understanding and reading waves. And often this technique is used to climb over the waves. So some people call it a climb over. I call it boofing, because you kind of just boof over top of the wave. It can be helpful for when you are faced with kind of a big wall of white water. And that's kind of what you're going to see with the following surfer who finishes a wave and then kind of has to turn around, is on the inside. So you'll see that he chooses this technique over the others because the wall of whitewater coming towards him still has some force. So a few things that I'd like you to pay attention to. Basically, this technique is about timing, which is really about all of these techniques. The surfer is waiting and looking at the wave for the perfect timing. He's actually putting back and he actually sinks the tail of the board. That gives him a little bit of like extra pump or punch because the board's so floaty that the tail is going to want to punch out of the water and straight up. And he's actually using that to his advantage to help him kind of like jump and climb up over the white water to get. So you can see that he's completed the wave and he's paddling back out. And there's a point where he actually makes a decision to either paddle around, but he realizes he can't. So this is where he will kind of jump over the wave, and here is the slow-mo version. So he's paddling for the shoulder, he's paddling to try to get around. When he realizes that's not going to happen, he realizes he's going to have to get over a different way. He leans way back, sinks that board way into the water, grabs onto the rails, and launches onto the other side. So the biggest advantage of having a big board really is paddle power. It's fast. And once you get a good paddle technique, sometimes the best technique is really developing a strategy and then applying the right technique. So maybe that means paddling around the wave, maybe that means punching through, maybe it's a boof, or the last case resort. If it's a really big wall, you might want a turtle roll. However, in this next little clip, I want you to kind of notice how there's a bunch of different things going on. And the biggest takeaway here is that I'd like you to notice that there is a lot of decision making happening based on the surroundings. So surfing is a really dynamic sport, and we have to be able to not just learn these techniques, but then be able to learn and adapt on the best time to use them in the circumstances. So as I mentioned in this next part, there is a lot going on, and I'm going to try to talk you through it as best as I can. So first up, really simple and clear, in the middle of the frame, we've got a surfer in red on the wave, and on the far left you can see that someone is paddling out and paddling around the wave. Oh, but then they can't paddle around the wave, it breaks, so they have to do a little boof to get over it. Now we have a couple of surfers paddling back out through the white water. They both punch through the wave here. And there's a set coming. There's more waves behind them. So one is trying to go around, one is going straight through, and you'll notice they both end up doing the kind of climb over boof technique. But in the slow-mo, I'd really like you to pay attention because one of them definitely hit the wave with more force than the other. So as they kind of punch through the last little bit, here's the replay. So we've got the surfer dropping in on a really beautiful wave, big set in the background. We've got coming up on the left-hand side, we've got a surfer that decides, okay, I'm gonna go around, let this guy ride his wave, and then he falls and then realizes, oh crap, I gotta go over this thing too, so I'm gonna boof on over it. And now we've got the surfer who fell off the wave and the other surfer who's paddling out to the back. A big set's coming, and then notice that both surfers on the left here, as one of them, they both actually punch through here. So we got punch through one and punch through two. Again, they're using the advanced technique. And as the other set comes through, the surfer on the far left decides, I'm gonna try to go around, and he's trying to book it outside as fast as he can. The other surfer decides to take the wave more on the head. And if you watch as they boof through, the force of the wave of the surfer that's more inside, that's more on the right, has to deal with less force. So the guy on the far left definitely had to deal with a lot more force of the wave. That's because he was closer to where it was breaking, and therefore it was the strongest there. It had the most force. Now, of course, they are, the last wave, the set's coming through, and they're going around, and one of the surfers is kind of punching through as they go over, crest over the lip. So just to wrap this whole thing up, I just invite you to ask any questions you might have. There are going to be some pieces that I go into in further detail in the future, like the turtle rolls specifically. And I'm also going to post a really helpful video about some of these techniques from a different source that I actually found really helpful when I was learning to surf, below in the description. So look for that. Let me know your thoughts, and Ánimo and aloha. Have a fabulous rest of your day, night, morning, and awesome waves. Go get some.